here in the North Coast. We've had a lot of initial support from other organizations, but this is the Disaster Response and Community Resilience Program area, which is what we're doing this presentation out of. We are looking forward to a better year. We all experienced a pretty harsh 2020 with the fires and the pandemic, and just the sense of all these new things that we are now having to normalize and get comfortable with. And I just want to maybe leave some room for Sabrina to introduce herself as well, and we'll go on to the presentation.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sabrina. I'm from Cooperation Humboldt as well. And I'm excited to be here. I'm wondering, Amy, if you would like to offer one of the technique breathing exercises you talked about in your email to kind of like demonstrate that. I love all the things that you talked about, and I want to like take some time to reply to it in a more like reply to each point on like email, on paper or whatever. But I do like what you said, and I'd be curious to see like what that would look like
in real time. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Great. Seems like a good moment to do that. So this is one that I will do a lot, just if I catch myself during. So Larry, my name is Amy Day, and I work for Huff, for the Unitarian Church in Bayside there. I'm sorry, they don't like the word church, fellowship. So the Unitarian Fellowship there. And this is kind of the first time that that Oscar and Sabrina have offered this course. And so we're just looking at what ways that we can just add to and enhance and uplift what they're already doing. So we had talked about how somatic techniques can really be a wonderful way to bring in resilience and just to kind of on a personal level. So yeah, let me go ahead, and if you want to close your eyes, if you're in a space where you can do that. And just begin by opening the jaw and exhaling. And if you like, just even letting go with a sound. And so even that sighing out sound is activating the vagus nerve, which is really responsible for a lot of our taking us out of fight and flight into rest and receive, rest and digest. So do two more like that. Deep inhale through the nose. And sigh out with a little bit of a sigh. Yeah, awesome. Let the jaw soften. One more like that. Deep inhale. Exhale completely. And then just let the lips come together. And we're going to inhale to a count of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause at the top for 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause at empty. 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's do that 2 more times. So inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause at the top. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Pausing at the bottom. One more time like that. Inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep the face and the jaw soft as you just allow the breath to stay at full. Slowly let it go for 4, 3, 2, 1. Pausing at the bottom. And then when you're ready, just allow the breath to come back to normal. You can take a moment just to pause and notice if anything has shifted. And then when you're ready, allow the eyes to slowly enter back into the space. So that's just box breath is how that's oftentimes referred to, right? Because you're building an even-sided little box there with all your 4 counts. I like that one just to kind of come back to homeostasis when I find myself feeling a little too scattered in my day. So yeah, just a little taster of what we can do by just by changing our breathing. So thanks for making space for that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for offering that. And on that note, I also want to touch on another thing that you mentioned, which is the bigger why behind the work we do, and why we're here. And I think that, I think that the reason that I'm a part of this work is because I recognize that I've been put on this realm to be a part of an ecosystem, and finding my role within the natural world has been a quite a journey for me, and an important one that's given me a really strong sense of like fulfillment and just grounding and ability to release all the parts of life that like I would try to worry about, but that aren't necessarily relevant to my role as, as being. And so it's a relief to just like find your flow and be centered. And I think that we're at a point in time right now where a lot of people's roles in this ecosystem is to really take action and do work to build community and educate others and support others and strengthen what we have currently, because we are in some very tumultuous times. And so it is kind of like the like get down to business point in time, at least in my opinion. And I found that the more that I get involved in work and activities and stuff that benefits the greater good, the more I feel like I have found my role in this ecosystem. And so yeah, that's the bigger why to why I'm here. So okay. Yeah, so Cooperation Humboldt is an organization. Larry, I don't know how familiar you are with Cooperation Humboldt, but we are an organization in Humboldt that works to build a solidarity economy. And the idea of a solidarity economy is that it's one that allows for all people to have their needs met without exploiting anyone or without exploiting nature, and really puts like the well-being of people and nature at the forefront of everything, and recognizes that if anyone has to suffer for anything to get done, then there needs to be a better way to do it. And so part of what brings us here with Huff today is that we reached out to them in our effort to just kind of develop relationships and create networks in the community where we are all supporting one another and are conscious and aware of one another and can help each other grow and use the strengths of ourselves as individuals and of each of our organizations to offer those to the wider network. And through that, it would be what that would look like would just be like this network of organizations and people that are sharing resources and exchanging skills. And so that's why I love that Amy brought forward this a way to open up these meetings that bringing the strengths of Huff to the surface, because this meeting is specifically focused on kind of Cooperation Humboldt's strength, which is to educate others on the idea of building resilience in communities. And so even just looking at, opening up the meeting that way is already, in my opinion, makes it, brings it to that extra level. And I love the idea of collaborating on strengths. So,
Right.
So yeah.
May I just say something at this point?
Yes, Larry.
Absolutely.
Okay, you obviously don't know me, but I started Transition Humboldt here back in 2012. I was the driving force behind the transition community that joined up with Cooperation Humboldt. Cooperation Humboldt took over the transition town effort in, I think, 2 years ago. And I was leading it up till that point. I'm familiar with your group entirely, so I know all about what you guys do. And as far as Unitarian Fellowship, I'm one of the early members of the fellowship. I was a member back in 1979. And I was a member for probably about 5 years. And I know a lot of the old timers from the fellowship, but I was a fellowship member, so I'm familiar with the group. But probably of most importance is I worked on resilience issues with Transition Humboldt, and now I work with 350 Humboldt. 350 is the local climate change organization working on climate change action for the area. And resilience has been one of our key focuses for years now. And I'm really curious what you're doing with the resilience movement, because we actually have books. In fact, I should share with you a really great book that was put together down in the Bay Area about building resilient communities. And it used the Bay Area as a model, and it had all of these really great ideas for how to really establish resilient communities. And I'd love to share it with you at some point, because it's probably 10 years old now, but it really is relevant.
Oh, that's definitely relevant. I mean, we're right now working with NorCal Resilience Network that is based
Good.
out of the Bay Area, and they want us to be a bioregion for Humboldt. And so some of this work that you started with the transition movement and now is Cooperation Humboldt, it's so great to have you here, Larry.
Sure.
I love speaking to
I
those.
I was also part of the resilience movement that helped get that group going.
Right.
Yeah. Do you know Susan Silber or any of those folks? Susan's in Berkeley, and she's part of the whole Bay Area Coalition.
Yes, we're in I've never met Susan, but I've been exchanging emails with her because she got us connected to the Resilient Hub training that's happening.
Oh, good, good.
So yeah.
She and I go way back. We were involved in early gatherings. We had these NorCal permaculture and resilient community gatherings at the Solar Living Center in Hopland. And for many years, we put on a big show where we had local speakers and folks from the Bay Area. We had Van Jones there. We had, some really interesting speakers. And we really talked about building resilient communities. And we have videos from those shows. And I'll be glad to share them with you because they were really amazing. There are a number of people you're going to recognize that were very influential in the movement. Susan Silber is one of them. And if you see Susan, say hi from Larry, because
okay.
we go back 20 years, I think. And Susan is a real go-getter. And I'll tell you, she's a mentor. She's somebody you can really develop a long-term relationship with. She's very, very capable and an interesting person. Really interesting person. So I hope you connect with her.
Definitely.
And what I'm going to do is afterwards, I'll give you my email and write me back. But if you'll get in touch with me, I have videos I'd be glad to share with you.
Yeah, be amazing.
I have a whole bunch. And some of them are professionally made. I mean, these go back, 10, 15 years, but they're still relevant. They're totally relevant. And I got tons of that stuff. I'd like to share it.
Right. We would love to receive it. So thank you so much, Larry.
Sure.
I just want to take a moment to just acknowledge how our culture, it seems to be rubbing off on this small little thing, because we love to check in personally as a group. We love to just say, okay, we're not going to just jump into business. We're going to acknowledge each other as people. Amy, thank you so much for giving us that moment to really catch our breath.
Exactly.
That's us tying ourselves to the present moment. And so the content is secondary. What's primary is the participant. Larry, thank you for being here. And if we'd had more, Humboldt Area Fund, not Humboldt Area Fund, sorry, I'm mixing up my acronyms. But if we had more Huff participants here, we would want those participants to feel like they're the primary reason we are here, to have the conversation, to mold their interests and desires and abilities to the work that we have to offer. And so that's already a mutual aid network right there. We're trying to offer support, guidance, and inspiration and education. and Amy's able to offer us some sense of grounding.
Good.
And honestly, like like this has sparked, like this experience just in this last 10, 15 minutes has sparked this feeling that we need to take this to our team to kind of have a sense, because I'm sure there are a lot of other team members within Cooperation Humboldt that may be quiet about needing these types of support, having this sense of getting grounded, having these breathing techniques, and like, you know, doing it weekly or doing it bi-weekly, or even twice a week. Like I feel like it would be greatly beneficial to our work performance. So I just want to say that right up front, and I appreciate how we were all able to, you know, take the time. Larry, we will definitely be catching up with you, and for consideration.
I'm just cooking while we're talking, so it's all good. But
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. I want to hear what you have to say. I mean, if you have a presentation, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, we're segueing in there. Sabrina, do you want to screen share or should I?
You should. My computer's slow, but so we do have a presentation. This is our first time giving it, so we're kind of learning as we go of like what parts were, you know, are received well, what parts to, you know, to change around. We're just still, it's a learning process.
That's why I want to be part of this. I want to see what you're doing, because I definitely think I could share some stuff that'll help you.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see your presentation.
Totally. So right now it's a 6-part presentation, and right now we're on the second to last part, which is week 5. And this week we talk about neighborhood mapping and assessing needs, which is a tool of building resilient communities that we've been connected with. We haven't personally gotten a chance to do this yet. It's definitely a like COVID free activity. So I'm sure there's a way to do it virtually, but it's definitely been designed to be like an in-person thing. But it still seems to be a very valuable tool and a really great way for neighborhoods to connect and to really get an idea of the resources that exist within a neighborhood and on like an individual level, and as well as the needs that exist in the neighborhood on an individual level. I know that personally, and I know Oscar can attest to this, Cooperation Humboldt has been like, people have reached out to Cooperation Humboldt on numerous occasions of elderly people who are just like living alone and not fully functional. Like maybe they have a physical disability or a mental disability, and they don't really have any support. And I doubted if any of their neighbors are really aware of what's going on there. And so like the last resort is that they contact Cooperation Humboldt, and like we're not equipped to handle that kind of stuff. But so yeah, like that's just an example of how like this individualistic way of living where everyone is kind of like in their house and avoids their neighbor, you know, out of fear of conversation or something, has really created a fragile type system where if real disaster happened, or if something happened in someone's life, like there's not a lot of infrastructure in place to really offer everyone the support that they need, or really to give anyone a chance to really like to know like what's going on around them, or who's in need, or who has what. And so the idea of neighborhood mapping kind of is a solution to that, or at least a way to go about that. Do you want to start the next slide? It's definitely like what we're going to go through is the neighborhood mapping, the Map Your Neighborhood process, which we were introduced to through our comrade Andrew from the Red Cross. He kind of told us about this specific procedure, which is through the Washington State Emergency Management. By no means is this the only way to go about doing something like this, but this is kind of what we have, like the resources that we have, and so we're kind of using this as like a guideline and a framework. But with the idea being that like you can take in this information and then apply it to your community, or like put it into a process that feels right or doable for you. And so the idea, go back. So yeah, the idea of having these mapping your neighborhood and creating these circles is that you have residents who are you create these little micro community where residents are all aware of each other and each other's needs and are able to meet their needs in times of disaster, or, you know, and what a disaster looks like could be a large scale disaster that affects everyone, or maybe a little disaster that affects some people or just one person. And so creating that that framework is what this is about. So mapping your neighborhood, what is mapping your neighborhood? You can kind of guess what it is just by the title, mapping your neighborhood. It's identifying existing resources, identifying absent resources, building mutual aid networks. So maybe you notice no one on your block has a generator. During the power outages, we realized that that's like a thing that's necessary. So maybe everyone in the neighborhood goes in on a generator or something. And then when the next time something like that happens, there is one. So assessing needs, assessing absent resources, and then possibly finding solutions to fill those, or solutions to go about handling a situation where those needs might come up and how it would be handled. So why is that important? Well, it's building strength and, or it builds and strengthens neighborhood relationships. Even this process of just like, hey, you know, meeting your neighbor and being like, hey, like, want to go through this checklist and like see what equipment you have, like just that initial conversation is a great way to just build relationships and establish familiarity among neighbors. And then when support is needed, you know, someone will know that they'll know who's available. They'll know who's a good person to go to for what equipment is where, who has what skills, who has what knowledge. And so people feel safer and people feel more supported in times of need. And then, so where is your neighborhood? So we say map your neighborhood. That could be like, what does that even mean? So who does your community engage with? What is absent in your neighborhood? What does your organization have the capacity to take on? Now, when it says, what does your organization have the capacity to take on, where that comes from is the approach that we took in this process, which was first reaching out to resilient hubs that are a stronghold in their community. And so possibly the idea of mapping the neighborhood around these quote unquote resilient hubs or these organizations. And so, yeah, so when you're identifying your neighborhood, that's definitely going to be up to the community to kind of establish that. I know that in Eureka, they have like wards, so you could map your neighborhood by ward, you could map it by block. But you want to do what you can take on. And so like if you're just starting as an individual, maybe just going like down the block or something, like a few houses down, start there. And then like as you do that, you can maybe grow your map and expand the neighborhood that you are addressing. And then the ways to go about this, empathy interviews, which empathy interviews is just the idea of just having a genuine conversation where you're really giving the person the space to tell their story, express their needs. You know, it's not a conversation with any intention necessarily or motives, but simply a way to really connect with someone and get an idea of where they're at. Community surveying, canvassing, and then hosting events. Again, these things are very non-COVID times, and so but we hope that eventually we'll be out of the COVID era, and so this is something to really think about moving forward about like how we can actually implement this, because hosting events, that is a really great way to gain neighborhood support, bring everyone together for a potluck and like have these conversations. We all know that food and snacks make everything so much more exciting. So,
right, yeah, people just want things to do, and the virtual setting is not as attractive or inviting as getting out in the sun when it's not raining, or bringing food for people to come and enjoy. We all miss these simple things, right? So this group discussion, oh, sorry. Yeah, part, we're gonna basically talk about, so basically like there's many forms that resources can like go into, like, you can have physical assets, you can have capital, and then you can also have people, like the people who you know is like probably your biggest resource in a time of disaster. And that's why we kind of are leading into this discussion where we want to ask participants to engage, what has it looked like in the previous disaster in the past? What organizations do you see when you think of disaster? I mean, like we all have archetypes organizations, FEMA, OSHA, American Red Cross. But there's also like behind the scene things happening that a lot of people don't notice. Artists, are like the people who like put things up and make sure that there's a adequate design or a good logo. Like maybe it was years before, but these are all like things like these positive externalities of preparing for disaster, employment opportunities, things like that. What neighborhood resources do you think of? Like, especially like maybe someone entering the community, have you established neighborhood resources? Has that ever been a consideration? And wherever something sparks, like, oh, that brings a thought, like, please interject and just say like, I do have a thought, like raise your hand, I can see everyone. But I'm going to list off the questions until something lands, and hopefully we can get into some type of conversation between all of us on what assessing resources looks like. How does your organization engage with city, county, or state resources? So that's like a different conversation. Like, does your neighborhood even need to reach out to the city, county, or state resources? Like, are you prepared enough that you actually don't need American Red Cross trailer? Like, do you guys have all the adequate supplies? There may be a neighboring community or a neighborhood that's adjacent to yours that may not have those supplies. They might not have, agriculture, like pot agriculture in Humboldt, or they may not have, they might be renting, or they might be, parents who are struggling. There might be different circumstances. And so being able to assess the resources is definitely telling of how prepared a community can be within neighborhoods.
Can I ask a question? Amy,
Yeah.
I'm curious if Huff being like, an organization that we identified together as a potential, like, well, it seems like y'all are already a resilient hub, but maybe being a more like community spoken resilient hub, I guess, if that makes sense. Could you see do like something like neighborhood mapping being like, or something similar to this or along this line being something that could be beneficial in the Bayside community, or like with the neighbors surrounding Huff, or something that even your organization in the future might have the energy to explore?
My feeling right now is that as things feel safer, right, as more people have gotten vaccinated and cases are going down and all of that, I feel like there is kind of a general consensus with the current membership and leadership of Huff that kind of community connection, community outreach is really a priority, because there is kind of that feeling that we're insulated and it's not just COVID related. So I think there's space and desire for further integration, and not just potlucks for the members of Huff, but potlucks that some events that draw people in from beyond just our tiny little borders, so to speak. Did that answer your question?
Cool.
Can I
Totally. Yeah,
say something?
of course.
Okay. Everything you're saying is really great, but I think the last year has been a real test of our real mettle. I've been working with resilient communities and folks like this for many years, and I think this last year has really been the pedal to the metal. This is where it all kind of came together, and from here it's going to be blossoming out. But one thing I want to warn you, I'm involved with CERT, Community Emergency Response Network. We have a McKinleyville operation, and I'm also a member of Humboldt Bay Fire CERT. We've been doing emergency planning and community emergency work for years now. And we should be involved in this group, and you should know a little bit about what we do, because you can get trained as a CERT member. And we're helping to set up emergency shelters. We're working on the vaccination project. We've delivered emergency supplies. We've done a lot of different stuff. But the point I want to get to, I think you're being very optimistic if you think things are going to get figured out by this summer. I think we need to be ready for at least another 8 to 9 months of some form of lockdown. Not necessarily what we have right now, but it's going to be still pretty critical. I'm not sure we're going to be having potlucks and meetings. I'd love to do it, but I just want to just inject a bit of reality. It could be October before things really kind of settle out. That's just my opinion. I just want to put it out there.
Yeah, thanks for that honest input. I like to be optimistic, but that is important to think about the reality of the situation. And I have come across multiple people now who have suggested that we get in contact with CERT and really like develop that relationship further, which we have not done yet. And I am very much interested in doing that. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm wondering like how, I don't want to get too off topic of the presentation, but what's up?
I would be glad to be a liaison for you.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get you into our next meeting, and I'll introduce you to some folks. I think you'd be really interested in what we do.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what Greg Foster, correct?
No, this CERT is, it's a community emergency response network. It's part of emergency Office of Emergency Services and Red Cross.
Okay.
So it's more, it's federal, but it's also local. And the thing about CERT is that each community can have its own CERT group. I'm trying to form one in Trinidad. I live in Trinidad, and we don't have a CERT group here, and we really need one. My focus has been wildfire, because I'm very interested in creating resilient communities in the woods. And I am very concerned about climate change and what it's be bringing to our area. And as far as taking everything you're talking about here to the next level, we've got like 5 years to really focus our work and get a lot done. And it's going to be hard.
Right. This isn't the first time that's surfaced, that concept of like living in the forests and like having resilient networks and systems and mutual aid systems and plenty of water, energy, alternative energy sources, food forests, like that all makes a lot of sense. I feel like this, like I would love, like I know that we have plenty of time actually, because this discussion was actually supposed to be for a different audience, but I think that this conversation is still helpful in terms of like.
If I could offer, I would be glad to host a little get together out at my place to demonstrate some of this stuff. I've been working on this stuff for 40 years, and we have a 10.5 kilowatt independent power system with battery backup and generator. We grow much of our own food. We have several large gardens, and we all are on wells. And so I just rebuilt my entire well system. I'd be glad to show, how that's working. And I'm eventually getting that on solar as well. So if you just want a demonstration, I'd be glad to host one. And there's a lot more people like me out there. I always suggested that I think what you ought to do is a village tour. We used to do that years ago for solar. We do the solar tours, and we take people out to people's homes that had solar to ask questions and find out what it's like. And it was huge. People loved it. They had a great time. I think you could put together a tour of the kinds of community efforts that you're describing. I mean, I know that in each community, there's something going on similar to the mapping and all of the other stuff you've been talking about. I think doing a tour of that would be a wonderful idea.
See, that's never come across my mind, but that sounds like it could definitely, that's what we were centering, engagement. That's what's missing, engagement. That's what we need, activities, things that people actually meaningfully attend.
That's the only way. That's the only way. When we were doing Transition Humboldt, I was involved with, before that, with the Occupy movement. That's where it all got started. Potlucks and get-togethers are the glue. I mean, that's what people love to do. And since we don't have that right now, we have to do what we're doing here, but we got to keep that glue, and having people involved in projects is the glue that keeps them going.
No, that's very accurate. For us, the struggle has been trying to source that glue. Getting
Well, you don't
people-
source it. You make your own. You know,
Okay.
you have to create your own glue. You can't just, take somebody else's glue and, apply it on the spot.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. But I guess when I said sourcing, I meant getting the people, the local infrastructure to create this glue. But then, and then the other part that we haven't even mentioned is getting, and using the same analogy here, is getting people to the glue.
Yeah. Well,
because
people will go to solutions. The thing I really believe in, nothing is more illustrative of what you're doing than success. Success stories are what people like to hear. And there's so many great books about this, but in the transition movement, we made a big deal about focusing on the positive in every community and every group and building from within. And it's a real permaculture concept to have zones where you have different zones of family and friends and community and so forth, but also how to build community. And I think you're on to it, but I think that demonstrating it is really what people want to see. They want to see examples. They want to see it work.
right.
Love that. So you're offering to host a
We could do an
demonstration of
outdoor
sorts?
gathering. Yeah, we could do an outdoor gathering that we could, I want to show off what we're working in our forest. We have a forest back that we manage, and we harvest trees from there. We have a neat little pond that we built as part of our landscaping, but eventually I want to be able to do aquaculture in it. And so I've done aquaculture projects before, and they're really kind of exciting. So there's things I'd like to demonstrate.
Yeah, I would love to plan that, and Oscar and I come out there and kind of like do like a trial, I guess you could call it, demonstration, and then we can find a way to maybe broadcast that to the larger community if that's something you'd be comfortable
Well,
with.
let me tell you what we've been doing for several years. There's another group I'm part of that I really want to recommend that you guys get involved with once it comes back. It's kind of in dormancy right now, but that's the Permaculture Guild. We have a permaculture guild here that's been going for probably 25, 30 years. And I've been a member for maybe 10. They're the folks. Have you lived here for a while? Do you know about the plant exchange? Every spring there was a seed and plant exchange, and we put out free plants and free seeds every year. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I've been here 5 years. Yes.
Okay, well, we've been doing it for 20 years. And every year it grows. The last time we did it, we had almost 3,000 people show up in it for a day. It was huge. But the thing is, that's what people love. Give away seeds, give away plants, share your plants, share your seeds. We did a thing what they call a scion exchange. You need to talk to Marlon Gill. Marlon is really he's one of the main guys behind
the Permaculture Guild.
Permaculture Guild. Do you know him?
I've heard his name in the Permaculture Guild community. Yes.
Yeah, Marlon's great. Yeah, you both really need to meet Marlon, and I mean he's living it. He's a place that we should take a tour. His place is freaking amazing.
Yeah.
He's a permaculture expert. He's growing all these fruit trees. He's got livestock. He's doing a lot of really good things, and he's a carpenter and builds a lot of his own stuff as well.
These are great information bombs. And Amy, I see you on Stack, and I want to give you the chance to chime in here.
Oh, I'm sorry if I've been hogging it. Sorry about that.
No,
no, it's okay.
I think my response was probably several points back, but I'm curious, Larry, where you're at. I'm up in West Haven as well, and I've had that same thought of just like, one thing about living up here is that everyone has such large parcels of property for the most part. We don't really
exactly
interact, Like
well,
I don't know most of my neighbors, and I've been here a decade.
Yeah, we should talk offline because I live on Stagecoach Road.
Okay.
I'm up on Stagecoach. We own from Stagecoach Road to Patrick's Point Drive. We have like 11 acres in there.
Yeah.
And we're in the back 6.5. So in any case, I know West Haven really well. I've been up here 37 years. So I'd love to get that talk because I think we need a community group up here, especially dealing with fire.
Mhm.
Wildfire is going to be one of our biggest problems in the near future. And if you want to do some real resiliency planning, start looking at fire. Fire safety and fire planning is critical. I mean, I still have stories about people that lost everything in those fires in the last couple of years. And I mean, talk about your life uprooted. People have been uprooted all across the state, and it can happen here too.
Yeah.
Andrew from American Red Cross, who Andrew Bogart, he's a director for American Red Cross. He came onto our team and he had the same exact pitch. He said, you know, fire response, like we have to get ready for next year's fire response. As soon as this year's
Right.
fire response ended, you know, Sabrina and I were doing we went out to Hayfork to view one of the actual sites where community members were evacuating. And that was eye-opening, right? Like, and what happened was we do want to start getting ready for fire response. What we're doing is we're getting ready for we have a volunteer management group that's dealing with spontaneous volunteer management, as well as unaffiliated spontaneous volunteer management, specifically for any sort of disaster. But there's going to have to be like a emphasis on fire response because I feel like that is the most pressing in terms of our community. And then obviously there's earthquake, tsunami, and others. Yeah, I think this is a discussion for a separate time, and I'm really glad that we got the ball rolling here. But let's go ahead and continue on with this presentation.
Sure.
And we'll probably have juicier conversations throughout the process.
Yeah, and I want to give you feedback about the presentation at some point. So please continue, but I want to talk to you about it later.
Of course. Thank you, Larry.
You bet.
All right. So we're transitioning from that conversation into what we are identifying as the 9 steps immediately following a disaster. This is from the Map Your Neighborhood guide that we got. We wanted to give participants like a taste of it, like what does it look like? And so that first is like, okay, you start at home, you start nuclear, and you get to take care of your loved ones, like make sure everyone's okay. Is everyone accounted for? Then you're gonna dress for safety, hard boots, hard hat, you know, maybe a reflective vest if the power's out. Check for natural gas or propane. I feel like this is super smart because that's not something that immediately is like I need to think about this when it's a disaster. You're thinking about the first 2 things, but the next thing is check for gas and propane. You know, obviously there's that smell now, but
And shut it off if necessary.
Yeah, it's shut it off. And then number 4 is shut off the water of the house as well. Number 5 would be place a help or okay sign, and they go into more detail.
Which
about
the next two steps are steps that are specific to like the Map Your Neighborhood process. So they might not make sense just think about it. So what they suggest is that everyone, and mind you, this is just part of their little process. It could be done differently. It could not be done at all. But basically they have these signs. The one says, okay, and one says, help. And the idea is if you need help, you put the help sign on your window. And if you're okay, you put the okay sign on your window. And then when everyone kind of meets, everyone will look or do like a little run through the neighborhood and assess the situation. And if anyone has a help sign, they'll get help. And then the idea about the fire extinguisher is that, again, it's just one of their suggestions is they think that everyone can put the fire extinguishers on the sidewalk so that if there's a small fire after a disaster, fire extinguishers will be on hand.
Right. And so for a community like West Haven or Trinidad, where everyone has large parcels of land and aren't really connected, it might not make sense to put that sign on your window. You guys may have to come up with a different, thing, a flag or a horn or something. I don't know. Get creative. But we're going to move on to the next step. And thank you, Sabrina. Yeah, those are specifically points made from Map Your Neighborhood.
Just as a quick point, I will give you some more pointers from the CERT manual. There's an entire section devoted to this. And I could give you some pointers that we use, and they should be generally shared.
Oh.
So I'll show you some of that stuff later, just as a pointer.
Yeah. So this is supposed to be like broad. We're not supposed
So
to
the
go-
next steps,
Oh, sorry, there's some lag.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is supposed to be relatively broad. Like we're not like here giving every detail exactly what you're going to get. We're not regurgitating the information. We're just trying to give participants a sense of what it would look like. And yes, CERT would be a good alternative. Like having had a conversation with CERT, we would have definitely included some of those more local resources from the county and from the Department of EOS. So Sabrina, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first steps are more about if you know like what to do within your house. And the next steps are what to do with your neighbors. So once you've kind of taken care of your situation, the next steps would be to go to the neighborhood gathering site, which we'll elaborate more on that, but just kind of thinking that every neighborhood should have a designated spot to go to in times of strong disasters so that everyone kind of meet and start to move forward. As you can see in step 8, the next step is to form the teams, and then team here again, this is just some general framework to get thoughts going, but it doesn't have to be exactly like this. So team 1, like having a team for listening specifically to the emergency alert system, specifically having a team to go out and check on the elderly and the disabled and the children. Having a team that will go to all the houses and check the gas and propane meters to make sure that they're off. And then a team to go around and check to see who needs help and be prepared to give first aid if necessary, but also use your instinct and don't get yourself into any danger that you might deem might be there. And then the next step would be for everyone to return at the gathering site and report what they've done and what they found and share with the neighbors. So and then so a neighborhood gathering site is a protected area that can be easily seen. You want to choose a space that's going to be well known and easily accessible to the community. A government affiliated organization is not recommended just because I mean, you know your community. If you have a lot of undocumented folks or folks who don't feel safe around law enforcement or government agencies, then obviously a neighbor or a government agency is not going to be the best place for a gathering site because people aren't going to really feel safe to go there. But yeah, that could be something that ties into Resilient Hub as well. You know, being that space that during a disaster, everyone knows that they can go and everyone will be there, and that will like start the communication among neighbors. And then also having a neighborhood care center is a possible suggestion, and that's a place where children, the elderly, the disabled can kind of be brought to so they're not alone and that they can be cared for, and you don't have to worry about their well-being or where are the kids, because they'll all be in that little designated area receiving adequate care from someone who's qualified to give it.
Right. And in all these centers, it's good to plan for redundancy. If you don't have, you need a plan A, B, and C. Hopefully your center isn't demolished and you have a center to go to. And so it's good to plan for backup centers, alternatives. Having redundancy in disaster preparedness is always a good thing.
So another step to neighborhood mapping is skills and equipment inventory. So that would be, who knows what, who has what, who can do what. And then writing the names of your neighbors with these skills and knowledge, equipment, supplies. They give like a little checklist of skills and equipment. By the way, yeah, neighborhood mapping is a resource that can be accessed, and they'll send you all these cool papers if you're interested. But so skills and knowledge. So who knows first aid? Who's skilled in childcare? Who crisis counseling, language skills, search and rescue skills, plumber skills, carpenter skills, firefighting skills. Things like that are also useful. Same with this, equipment and supplies. So to know like what's available in your neighborhood and being able to, what if your car breaks down and so-and-so is a skilled mechanic and they can help jump. What if you have an electrical issue? And this really helps to develop the relationships among neighbors, because really trying to create this ecosystem where it's like you can depend on your neighbor. You don't feel so isolated in your community and alone and every man for themselves. If something happens, it's up to me to fix it. Kind of like establishing these relationships and exchanging familiarity with skills and knowledge and equipment can help you feel like you're supported by the people living around you. So,
right. It can help you identify your strengths and weaknesses in the community. What are you going to start spending resources on in response to knowing, okay, we have a whole bunch of nurses and doctors. We're going to need some carpenters or etc. All right. Assessing needs. What does your community need? It's hard to know. You need to talk to them. You can't just know right off the bat. I mean, you might have, a lot of things that you can offer. And I feel like some of the, like we met Eva from Huff and Joanna, and there was a lot of sharing of a lot of experience and backgrounds of things that they already had. And so it's easy to gauge what you might have, but it's hard to know, what is out there. And so how do you like approach your neighbors without being like, the world is falling? How do you actually get to this point where people want to have this conversation? They're excited about this conversation. You've made disaster preparedness sexy again. And people are now willing to have these conversations and reach out and share resources. And, we can do walks on properties that are prepared and get communities involved, just like showing community members what it looks like to have solar panels on your house. And does your institution want to be a neighborhood gathering site? Like, that's a big thing to take on. I know that Humboldt Area Foundation has, some room, but there's also Bayside Community Hall. Would it be smarter for Huff to serve as an aiding role and Bayside Community Hall to serve as the actual gathering site? Would one be the care site for the elderly, children, and the disabled? These are conversations to consider and think, because if they're not appointed, then when it's needed, we won't be able to respond adequately. People will still be without that sense of support.
And the idea of this slide is to like ideally this would be presented to a group, and this wouldn't be so much of like someone explaining these bullet points, but it would be like an actual discussion with and I like what you said, Amy, about like bringing multiple organizations into this. So like, especially multiple organizations within the same community, that could be cool, because then you can really like have a conversation with okay, like what our community needs you're aware of, and that would be a discussion point. Like for example, are there needs of the Bayside? I know you don't live in Bayside, so I'm not sure what Huff's connection is with it, and like how familiar you are with the Bayside neighbors, but that would be a talking point. Like, what are the community needs of Bayside? Do you know at all?
I can't speak to that very intelligibly. Yeah, I mean, when I think of Bayside just in the broad strokes, I tend to think of fairly, upper middle class people who, many homeowners who probably likely have a lot of their basic needs and then some met. So maybe it's the same thing, as they're not really leaving their own private little acre or homestead to go. That's my impression of Bayside, not being a resident there. It's just, I think,
Gotcha.
Can I say something? I think you're not aware of something very important. There's a very strong movement in Bayside with the Grange. The Grange, it's now the Bayside Community Center. There's a whole group of folks that are organized around that, the community center, and there are local folks in the Bayside area, Maggie Gaynor, and there's a handful of other people who are actively involved in this stuff. There's a very active community in Bayside, so don't sell them short.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely not my intention to do that. I had to speak just from what my knowledge base is, which is obviously not complete. So thank you for that.
Okay, you need to try to meet a woman named Maggie Gaynor. She's my mentor. She is somebody that I look up to, and she is a real warrior. She has been at it for 40 years in the recycling movement. She helped get the Humboldt recycling movement going back in the 70s and 80s, and she's still at it with Zero Waste Humboldt. So you definitely need to meet Maggie Gaynor.
Amy, I actually have met Maggie Gaynor. I've met with her on several occasions, and I could introduce you to Maggie Gaynor if that's something you would like to do. She is a powerhouse and very knowledgeable and very impressive as an individual, what she's done for the community. I feel like maybe a conversation that we can resurface here is there were some conversations about West Haven and Trinidad, and being on rather large parcels of land and not having that immediate relationship with the neighbors.
Okay, here again, can I interrupt you?
Yeah, Larry, go ahead.
You really don't understand this area when you say that. We have some very strong community stuff going on up here. I'm part of a group up here called Rural Trinidad that's been meeting for over 35 years. And it's a whole association of homeowners along Stagecoach and Patrick's Point Drive. And we're all rural. We're all out in the country. We all have large, estates, 5 acres and more, sometimes maybe a couple acres. But we meet once a year and we know each other as neighbors, and we've done a lot of this resilience work together. This stuff is going on here, and it's happening in West Haven too. There's a West Haven Center for the Arts and their whole community. There's a very strong community here. It's just underground right now because of the COVID, but there's an active community in both of these areas. So I want you to appreciate there's a lot going on up here.
Right. Amy.
Oh, I'm more just thinking about just, our communication, because I think, in any kind of change making that we're trying to do, I think if we operate from a place of appreciation, because I deeply understand that everyone here is bringing their time and their gifts and their knowledge, and we all operate from a finite knowledge base, right? Every single one of us, regardless of how much time we have invested in this. So I just, I would just like to encourage all of us to move from a place of mutual respect and appreciation, because I think we all want the same things, and I don't think anyone is trying to disparage any efforts or any history of activism in this community. So I think just acknowledging that we're all working towards the same thing, and some of us has just been at it longer. And so we thank you, Larry, for your input and for bringing the history of this area more into focus for us.
For what it's worth, there's a lot of history here, and there's some really not only educated people, but there are folks up here who are living it. They practice it in their daily acts. And I think these are the kind of people that you should use as examples and maybe mentors, like Maggie and like people like that who live it. They're living the dream. And it's hard work, but they're doing it. And I just think it would be helpful to meet some of these folks and find out what they're doing, because they are practicing resilient community building. They are really in the trenches.
Yeah, I would love to meet these people, and not only would I love to meet them, but I would love to create some sort of platform where they can be a picture of what resilience looks for, and a way to get that out to the community, because unfortunately this information is not really that easily accessible until you really immerse yourself in it. Like mind you, me and Oscar, we just got kind of put into this work last year out of a need that no one else was really stepping up to meet, at least within our circle. I'm not saying there are people doing this, but just within our circles and our community, from what we could see, there was a need there was a need, and we were like kind of put in a position where we were like, okay, let's throw something together. And we've been really like actively doing this and devoting a lot of our time to this, but there's like everything that you're saying is so valuable, but we still don't know this information. And so like finding a way to get this information out so that people don't have to dedicate hours of their time just to barely scrape the surface of what's going on in Humboldt. Because like you said, like there's all this stuff happening, and it's like I'm aware of some of it, but by no means am I aware of all of it. And like I said, I vote all, this is what I do all the time with all my time, is this type of work. And so like the fact that there's still so much that I don't know is like, it just goes to show how much people can spend their time learning about this stuff and still not know everything. And so I would love to not only connect with these people, but like create something, I don't know, like some type of way or some type of presentation or like you said, village tour where just general people in the community who don't necessarily have the time to like dive into resilience and disaster, a way for them to like really see this and understand this and be able to like then implement that in their lives. But like you said, focusing on the positive, and people learn from demonstrations and examples, and that's what people want to see, and that's what people learn from. And so creating ways for people to easily kind of step into this resilience disaster ecosystem, see all the beautiful, amazing things that are going on, and then without having to like dedicate hours and hours of their time, because not everyone has that, but be able to like see all the things that are being done. That's kind of like something that we talk about and are working on.
Oh, can I just give you a point of information?
Sure.
Before you start showing it, you have to go there yourself.
Of course.
So what I would be glad to do is give you some introductions. There are people in this community who've been doing this stuff for a long time and are real experts at it that you should get to know. I mean, case in point, Levon Durr. I don't know if either of you know who Levon is, but he's a mushroom expert in this area. He grows his own mycelia and he grows mushrooms, and he's a mushroom expert, and he's using mushrooms for remediation of oil spills. He's doing mushroom biologics. He's doing all kinds of work with mushrooms. Here's a guy that's really dedicated 20 years of his life to the Permaculture Guild and to working on his mushrooms. He's the kind of guy you should meet. You know, he's an interesting man that could teach you a lot. And he is an example of the wealth. We have this deep well of talent in this area. And I hope you take avail of yourself of the ability to meet these people, see what they're about, then promote them.
I would be honored to meet these people, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, if you could connect me to all these names you mentioned,
Sure.
Levon Durr, Maggie Gaynor.
I'll tell you what we should do.
Marlon Gill.
One of these meetings, we can plan it for a week or two from now. We'll put a Zoom call together with all these people at once. And you'll get to hear what each of them have to say about what they're doing and what's going on today. I could put together a Zoom meeting of 4 or 5 real community leaders that I think would be extremely influential for you, but also give you a perspective on what's happening up here, because there's a deep well of talent, and you just have to meet them.
I would love that. I would love that. And then I would love to even like take that a step further and connect one-on-one with each of those individuals in a way that allows me to just really put the spotlight on them and really delve into like, because that's exactly what you're explaining is exactly what I'm looking for. Because like I'm new to this community. I don't know that deep well. I'm just getting involved. And so if I could meet these people and really indulge in like all of their knowledge, and if they're willing to share that, I would be honored, truly.
You know, as I say, I've been here 42 years. With another 42 years, I might actually get something done.
Right.
So it's like, it's all relative. It's a deep well. You have to take it one sip at a time.
Totally. Thank you.
Sure. I have to apologize, folks. I need to go because it's my dinner time. But do you have my email?
I don't.
Let me
Can you
just
put
give
it
it to you.
on the chat?
What's that?
Do you mind typing it in the chat? Are you able?
Sure,
or do
I'll
you-
put it in the chat area. Okay, I'll put my email there. Email me and we can talk further online.
Totally. That sounds
Okay.
great. Thanks, Larry.
All right, thank you, and good luck with your
Larry.
presentation. I think you're doing a good job, and I want to help in any way I can.
Have
Appreciate
a good
it.
night, Larry. I appreciate
We're
you being
doing
here.
our
thank you.
best.
You bet.
So he's adding the information to the chat, which
I'm
is
putting
great.
it in now.
Thank you, Larry. You know, I want to just acknowledge something right now that, so Cooperation Humboldt came into this because of necessity, you know, and so then the DRCR program area was built. Andrew also is relatively new to the community, came in as an advisor, and now we've got some grounding that when we actually go to these individuals who Larry is going to connect us with so graciously, like we have something to show. Like this is like what we have, like this is our place in this type of work. Like spontaneous volunteer management really is one of the things that we feel that we can offer. We've done so successfully. That's something that we have to offer. And so like that's great. Like I feel like now we're at the place where those conversations can actually go to like areas, and we don't have to feel like that advising that they can provide can actually carry the work further, not just
You're
baby us
you're
essentially.
so
Um,
you so remind me of myself 20 years ago. That's how I started up here. But I got I'm very proud of the fact that I am in the group that got the Humboldt Bay nuclear power plant decommissioned and permanently removed. It's been decommissioned and removed from this county. You weren't really here when the plant was operating, but we had a nuclear power plant here that we, as a group of about 20 people, focused on for 35 years. And we got it completely shut down, decommissioned, and gone. First time, as far as I know, in the West, maybe in the country. So there are some other folks up here, movers and shakers, that I'll be glad to introduce you to that I think you'll get a real kick out of. The thing that I just want to say to you, you're right on the money. All of you, you're all doing the exact work. You need some more refinement. What I would like to do, if it's possible, is give you one of my presentations and see how I do it. And if there's anything that you could use from that, I'd be glad to share it. You could just take whatever you want and reuse it. But there's a lot of depth to what you're talking about that you can get into in some of these programs that are really relevant. And I'd love to show you a slideshow that I put together. It talks about this, that will give you a much better sense of what's possible out there. It's just something I'd like to share with you.
Thank you. That would be amazing.
Good.
Yeah, we just threw this together. Like this is a learning experience. So any guidance, we appreciate your guidance. The criticism is welcome. We're by no means saying we know everything. If anything, like we're so new to this. So
I
we
get it.
appreciate the guidance.
Everyone has to start somewhere, but I'll
Right.
tell you what, we stand on the shoulders of all who came before us. And there is a lot of knowledge before us that we are beneficiaries of.
Mhm.
And the thing is to not reinvent the wheel if we don't have to.
oh yeah.
There's so much that's out there that will complement what you're doing without having to reinvent the whole wheel. And I'm going to share some of that with you, and you'll see you could make it a really dynamic presentation with a couple of key illustrations and good examples, and ideally local examples. You want to be able to say, and here's this guy, and he's doing this. And
Yeah.
here's this guy in Bayside, and he's living it. And here's somebody in Eureka, and they did this amazing garden, and check it out. I mean, there's tons of that, and that makes it relevant to your next door neighbor.
So
You
true.
know, you want to be able to present this to somebody you don't know who lives up the block from you, that you run into in the market once in a while, but you don't see them much. But you want to say, we're doing a presentation about the community. You want to join us? And this hooks them in because they see their friends and people they know. And it's, well, anyhow, I'll share it with you. You got my email, write to me. I'm going to send you some stuff, and let's do another meeting in the future, and I'll have to give you a presentation of my own.
Great.
Sounds
Can't
great.
wait. We'll be in touch.
Good, thank you.
Thanks,
All right,
Larry.
take care then. Yep.
You too.
Bye. You got my email?
Totally. Wrote it down.
Good. All right, very good. Take care then.
Cool. Well, that was good.
Okay.
I'm excited about that. Some passion and
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah, every time we get some random burst of energy, that was just the atom bomb of energy. So let's weather the storm. I'm really excited about all this because I think I think Sabrina and I don't have all the time to express to him everything that we're doing, but I think a lot of the things that we're doing will land really well with the guidance he's offering.
And
So
I love what he said about not reinventing the wheel. If there's framework that we can build off of instead of starting from scratch like we have been, that's beautiful. Like I would love to not put together another presentation if there's already ones available.
right, no, totally. I'm looking forward to it. So let's
Also though, maybe bring some if there's, like he said, a lot of the material might be old, so we can, and that's what I love about the arts thing that I'm working on is like, if we bring artists into this process, then we've got like so much potential to like just create some really cool stuff about what's going on in an artistic way.
Okay. Yeah, totally. And you didn't even mention that new position you're in.
I didn't feel like there was even the time.
Right.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
definitely takes practice
Yeah.
to be able to communicate with all the styles.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a style. That's a good way of saying it. It was a style of presenting.
Yeah, I
this
know
very-
that there was no ill intent within that, but it was definitely so the actual neighborhood mapping process is there is like a they give you graph, or you can get graph paper, and they actually do suggest that you sketch out your neighborhood, including the streets and building lots and houses, and number each house. And then number the lots and mark the exact location of natural gas meters and propane tanks. And they even suggest for the propane tanks that you're very specific about that, and that you actually like identify the exact location and put like little wording like behind the lilac bush on the front corner of the house, so that it's during a disaster, there's not like a lot of searching around. They can know exactly where it is. And then matching the people to the houses. And these little pictures are screenshots from this booklet of, an example that you can use. So you can see the contact list has the names, children names, phone number, email, pets, and then any specific needs. And then here's a little example of a map. And then just to the far right there, just matching the people to the houses and what that would look like, and marking the G for the gas and the propane. So
Amy, did you have a question, or did you?
Oh, no, I guess I'm just curious. So Sabrina, when you say they in reference to the materials, like can you tell me what the they is that you're referring
yeah,
to?
so when I'm saying they, I'm referring to whoever is behind the Washington State Emergency Management Map Your Neighborhood program.
Okay, gotcha.
I actually reached out to Washington State Emergency Management and asked them to send me these materials. And there's a lot of different, so this is one. There's also something called Ready Together, which is something that the Transition US Network put together, and they approach it in a similar but different way. This is the resources that I have on hand, and so this is kind of what we put together for this presentation. But again, like there's so many ways that you can do this, and it sounds like CERT even has like a local way to do this, which is great because it's important to take in your actual neighborhood into consideration and like what processes are going to work best.
An element that
You muted yourself.
sorry. And something that didn't surface when we were talking about CERT was that is available, but there is a reason why people don't use it. Like it's like he's like, oh, we need to start one in Trinidad, and every town can have one, but there isn't one. There's that missing step. There's that missing link. And just to clarify, that Transition Streets incorporates Map Your Neighborhood into Transition Streets, so it's kind of like a 2-for-1 package. But I just feel like that's worth mentioning because like we could be that link, you know, and like in the work that we're doing, building this community like relationships with all the organizations
Totally.
and more advice from Larry and getting connected to those big players. Like we
Well,
could,
and one thing I've noticed about like CERT and the people I've connected where CERT is, I feel like they've been in the community for so long and they've been doing this work for so long that they're very like they communicate in a certain way that might be a little off-putting or difficult for certain people to receive, like kind of you said. And so people aren't drawn to CERT because you know their idea of CERT is a certain demographic of people that they don't relate to, and so the idea of joining or exploring CERT is not appealing. And so I think that one thing that that Cooperation Humboldt and like the team, the disaster response team, can do is kind of take this valuable information, like these people who have been here for years, take this information and make it something that's accessible to the community and received well through the community, because it isn't communicated in a certain way that isn't translatable to everyone, or so
And
making this all user friendly.
I think that's huge too, because there's something about making it uh, accessible and even appealing, there's just, if the personalities involved are a little bit brusque and a little bit off-putting, like there'll just be a certain percentage of people that don't know how to get past that, and to get so by being that kind of spoons full of sugar conduit, like to get the information from one place to the other, in a way that people can access in a way that feels good to them, that's powerful. That's not to be underestimated, for sure. Diplomacy is huge.
Right.
Yeah. And
we
it's,
will definitely.
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
It's just interesting, just the more I'm looking at all of this, is just I keep thinking about just, the unique situation of kind of semi-rural living. And just, I mean, even in Bayside, right? A lot of people do have, I mean, like living in Eureka or Arcata, right? I would imagine it has a very different feel. Like, you hear your neighbors, you see them every day. And like, there's days I don't even see the people on my road, and I wonder how much that's true for a lot of people who live in this area. So, yeah, just
I will say there's map your neighborhood in rural settings, as well as map your neighborhood for vertical neighborhoods, which we can always make another presentation to dive deep into those.
Nice.
Yeah. So there are solutions, because that's definitely like, these seem to be kind of more, this seems like a kind of like McKinleyville, Arcata, maybe like Eureka-esque.
Yeah.
Little suburban town.
Yeah, definitely suburban land.
I went to a couple of Eureka CERT meetings and they just kept talking about businesses. And I just felt like I was so detached from businesses, a small business, just like life, that I couldn't justify going to every meeting because I wasn't really connected with that community. But there's definitely like there's, certainly we will get through the rest of this presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're almost done.
So again, with intentions of this being for the broader Huff community, or a focused group, what we would want people to do is like, all right, like let's find immediate neighborhoods to initiate this process. Like, and you can start thinking of it in terms of streets, because sometimes like it might seem daunting to do all of Sunnybray, but maybe just doing like West Sunnybray or something like that, right? Like that seems tangible. So you don't have to like make yourself feel like it's way too much.
Amy, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah,
what is Huff's relationship with Bayside Community Hall? Because they are another organization that we reached out to about being a resilient hub and like about this whole idea, and they were receptive, but apparently they move really slow there, and we haven't really talked to Pete in a while. But I'm curious like what the relationship with Bayside is. Hearing from Larry that there's like a huge movement there, that's intriguing to me, but at the same time I'm wondering you know, if there's this huge movement, then how come when something is brought forward to them, there's not much movement
Yeah.
into implementing that? So like, are you kind of familiar with them, or?
Well, okay, so my perspective, so Huff, I don't think has much more than just a passing relationship with the Bayside Community Hall. That's definitely something that was when our last minister was with us, and he had just come in he was, I think, from Arizona was the last place he was living. And so there's kind of that perspective that you get being new to an area. You have that freshness. You haven't been here for so long that you can't see the forest for the trees. And so that was one thing that he saw, was just like, we don't really have, connections with our neighbors. So at the moment, yeah, we don't really have that. And I guess on the broader end of that, like, my perspective on a lot of the really cool things that Humboldt has going on is that it's a lot of, kind of small grassroots type things, that a lot of them are happening underground, and a lot of people, it's a lot of, small groups of people doing things that a lot of people don't really know about. So, and it seems to me like there's an opportunity right there, since you guys have, Cooperation Humboldt has a presence in this community, and you guys are continuing to grow this. It seems like, yeah, my perspective is that there's a lot of people doing cool things, but not very many people know about it necessarily.
Yeah, and it's interesting, this idea of like these underground movements, and I get the appeal of, it's exclusive, you know who's involved, and you're not, that like outsiders aren't going to get involved. But I feel like to really be successful in building like resilient community on a large scale, like the underground has to come to the surface and has to make itself known, because how can it actually be useful to the people beyond, beyond the like few people involved in it, if it's just this like exclusive underground thing? And I don't know if it's intentionally underground, if they're like, don't tell anyone about it, or if it's just that like it's word of mouth, and if it gets out, it gets out, but they're not going to actually take initiative to get it out there. So
Right.
I'd be curious to kind of have a conversation around like with maybe some of these underground groups or whatever, and see if there's like if they would be open to being more public. Because I think that like a relationship between Huff and Bayside Community Hall would be like a really good step to take for like, we kind of did this presentation. We've discussed like what Huff wants to do, like threw some ideas out there. But I think that like it sounds like just strengthening that community relationship is a really good starting point. And so I would be very interested to like see Bayside Community Hall and Huff connect, especially around this stuff, because then you could say, because the reason I even asked that, I was wondering if you could like vet us almost and be like, hey, they gave us this really great presentation, like y'all should check it out, or should like really consider working with them more collaboratively. And so yeah, like spreading the word in that way would be cool, because there was some interest in Bayside Community Hall, but again, like there was never any, it kind of like paused or something.
Yeah. Let me do a little digging as far as that goes. I mean, I will say, I mean, as far as kind of pimping you guys out to the larger ecosphere, so to speak, I have, I've been in West Haven for 11 years now, and I have, my kid goes to school up here, and so I would be a much better resource for just for sharing your wisdom with this micro community up here, more likely. But yeah, as far as Huff goes, let me check in and see what particular relationships we have going on with Bayside Community Hall right now, because I'm not sure what that looks like.
Yeah, that's like one of the things that the new COAD position is trying to do, is surface these underground networks and connect them where it's appropriate. And I think they're underground by design, Sabrina. So when you were saying, I don't know if it's like this on purpose or if it's not, I think it's just by design, their immediate needs, supporting their immediate like community, like neighbors, and that makes sense. The rest of the stuff, like a lot of the stuff with, in terms of next steps, action items, like they don't have to be like any of these. Like it depends on what your team decides, you know, like these are just obvious things like Google spreadsheets. Yeah, you want to print it out monthly because if the power goes out, you won't have access to it. Outreach to engagement in the broader neighborhood. Maybe you don't have the capacity, you don't have time for that. Encourage them to map their neighborhood. Yeah, you can encourage people, but if people don't want to do something, like we've been saying, absence of activity, absence of meaningful engagement, then it won't really, you know, happen. Creating a map with locations of organizations, individual skills and services. Yeah, if someone has the capacity, it would be great, you know, but again, you know, these are all variable things that you and your team would have to decide that, okay, we actually can do this. We want to do this. We have resources. Like our team, I feel like we would be able to do this because we've been able to, you know, get a good framework of like what is here, what is existing. And now we have even more support and advisors on the way. So, you know, I feel like this for us would be something that is achievable, but to some people it may not be. And so reaching out to those local resources and asking for help and not reinventing the wheel is an important next step action item. These are the resources. That was our presentation. There was a lot of things happening in this presentation. So I appreciate everyone who was in attendance and looked through this for valuable information, because if you did, there was definitely some valuable information. Any closing thoughts, Sabrina, Amy?